My dad called at 3 a.m. "Your apartment building is on fire," he said. "Hope you have insurance." I started laughing. He sounded baffled. "Why are you laughing?"
He asked. "This is a tragedy."
I knew it was, but that building wasn't just my home. I'm Audrey, 32, and I'd spent 5 grueling years in New York City, fighting to establish myself as an artist. When my phone jolted me awake that early, I never imagined it would be Dad telling me my entire apartment building was engulfed in flames. What truly stunned him wasn't the disaster itself, but my reaction. I laughed. Not a quiet, uneasy giggle, but deep, unconstrained laughter that left him utterly bewildered. How could I possibly find humor in losing everything? The truth is, that building was so much more than just my address. Before I explain why I laughed at such a catastrophic event, let me take you back. I grew up in Oak Ridge, a small Midwestern town where everyone knew everyone, and aspirations rarely soared higher than the modest storefronts on Main Street. My parents, especially my dad, Harold, championed practicality above all else. He was an accountant, charting life in columns of financial security. My mom, while gentler, always yielded to his pragmatic wisdom. Their blueprint for my future was starkly simple: an accounting degree, a secure job, perhaps teaching if I ever craved a dash of adventure. Yet, I'd been drawing since childhood. My high school art teacher, Mrs. Lee, was the first to genuinely tell me I possessed true talent. While my father dismissed the stack of art school brochures on my desk with an eye roll, Mrs. Lee helped me assemble a portfolio. When New York accepted me into an art program with a partial scholarship, the war at home began. Art doesn't pay the bills, Audrey, Dad would assert, his voice calm yet unyielding. Do you realize how many talented people spend their lives waiting tables? Despite their protests, I moved to New York 8 years ago, armed with 2 suitcases and a resolve that felt like an impenetrable shield. That shield quickly eroded against the brutal reality of New York City's rent. My first year involved a constant shuffle between 3 cramped, shared apartments. I juggled 2 part-time jobs alongside classes, leaving me precious little time to actually create art. 5 years ago, I stumbled upon a building in Brooklyn. To call it unassuming would be generous.
It was 6 stories of faded brick, its windows
rattling with every passing truck. The lobby consistently carried a faint scent of cabbage, and the elevator functioned, optimistically, 60% of the time. Yet the rent for a 1-bedroom was astonishingly affordable, and crucially, the bedroom offered a magnificent northern light, perfect for painting. Mr. Vasquez, the elderly owner, rarely fixed anything, but also rarely hiked the rent. He'd owned the building for 4 decades, seemingly operating more on a handshake than a formal lease. My neighbors formed a diverse, long-established community. There was Vanessa, a night shift nurse who'd bring me soup when I was ill. Walter, a retired teacher whose Sunday morning jazz records were always too loud, but his taste was so exquisite, no one minded. And the Patel family on the first floor, who ran a small grocery just 2 blocks away, always reserving the freshest produce for us regular tenants. Every call with my parents inevitably led to Dad's persistent query: "Have you gotten renter's insurance yet?" Each time I'd promised to look into it next week. There was always a more pressing need: art supplies, dental bills, replacing worn-out winter boots. Insurance felt like an expense I could perpetually defer. In hindsight, the warning signs were glaring. About 8 months prior, the building began a steady decline. A pipe burst on the 4th floor, flooding 3 apartments. The back door, despite our collective vigilance, was frequently found unlocked. 2 minor electrical fires erupted in the basement, quickly contained, yet deeply unsettling. When we reported these issues, Mr. Vasquez, usually a picture of indifference, was uncharacteristically evasive, almost shifty. Ironically, amidst this decay, my art career was finally gaining momentum. After years of soul-crushing rejection emails and desolate coffee shop exhibitions, a small but esteemed Chelsea gallery had agreed to showcase my work. My paintings, which delved into urban isolation through fractured cityscapes, were resonating. The exhibition was set to open in just 2 weeks from the night of the fire. The day before the disaster, I noticed men in sharp suits, clipboards in hand, surveying the building. They weren't maintenance. Their expensive shoes and hushed tones made that clear. When I inquired, one offered a bland smile, claiming it was merely a standard inspection. I was too preoccupied to press further, having just completed 3 massive new canvases for the show, utterly drained. That night, I drifted off, enveloped by the scent of paint and the thrilling hum of possibility, utterly oblivious it would be my final night in that apartment. The jarring shriek of my phone shattered the 3 a.m. stillness. I fumbled blindly, knocking over a water glass before grasping it. The screen's glare was brutal. It took a moment to decipher Dad. Dad? My voice was thick with sleep. What's wrong? Is Mom okay? Audrey, I just saw it on the news. Your building is on fire. His voice was strained with fear. They're showing it live on national television. It looks awful, honey, truly terrible. Please tell me you're not there. For a moment, his words were just noise. My building? What do you mean? The apartment building on Bedford Avenue in Brooklyn. They're saying it started on the 3rd floor and spread rapidly. The reporter said the entire structure might be compromised. He paused. Please tell me you're somewhere else tonight. A strange, uncontrollable laugh erupted from my chest. Not a soft chuckle, but a full, almost hysterical peal of laughter. Audrey, why are you laughing? This isn't funny. Do you have insurance, like I told you to get? Please tell me you listened this one time. I tried to rein it in, but the laughter just kept coming. Dad, I finally managed between gasps. I'm not in the building. Thank God. But why are you laughing? You're about to lose everything. That only made me laugh harder. When I finally caught my breath, I explained, I'm not home because I'm at the gallery. I decided to move all my finished paintings there the day before, with the opening so close. I was so exhausted after setup that Sophia, the gallery owner, insisted I crash on her office couch instead of going all the way home. The irony was staggering. After years of my father's relentless warnings about protecting my possessions, one night I absolutely needed to be out of my apartment, I was. And the most priceless things I owned, my paintings, were safely stored elsewhere. My laughter abruptly died as a terrifying thought struck me. Dad, I have to go. My neighbors. I need to make sure everyone got out. I hung up before he could respond and frantically dialed Vanessa's number. No answer. Walter next. Still nothing. Panic surged. I hailed an Uber, tugging on my shoes, not even bothering to change out of the paint-splattered clothes from the day before. 20 minutes later, the Uber dropped me a block away, police barricades blocking closer access. The scene was chaotic. Horrifying. Flames still licked the upper floors, spewing sparks into the pre-dawn sky. Fire trucks lined the street, their flashing lights painting everything in urgent red. Hoses pumped water that streamed down gutters, thick with ash and debris. I pushed through the hushed crowd, desperate to find a familiar face. Walter was the first I spotted, wrapped in a Red Cross blanket, his white hair disheveled, face smudged with soot. He was arguing with a paramedic. Walter! I cried, rushing over. Are you okay? Where is everyone? He turned, relief washing over his features. Audrey, we thought you might still be inside. They haven't finished searching all the apartments. My heart plummeted. Who's still missing? The Patels? Vanessa? The Patels got out early, he pointed to them, huddled by an ambulance. Vanessa was working tonight, thankfully. But they haven't found the couple from 6B or the student next to your place. I spent the next hour in agonizing suspense, watching firefighters brave the inferno. The fire marshal, a stern woman with kind eyes, kept us updated. We're conducting a thorough search. The fire appears to have originated in a 3rd-floor utility closet. The building's outdated wiring may have been a factor. Finally, around 5 a.m. came the blessed news. Everyone was accounted for. The 6B couple had been with family, the student at his girlfriend's. No serious injuries, though several, including Walter, were treated for smoke inhalation. As dawn broke, the marshal pulled some of us aside. I don't want to speculate, she said quietly, but certain aspects of this fire are concerning. The origin point and rapid spread hint at possible tampering. We'll be conducting a full investigation. Her words hung heavy, the implication chilling. Could someone have deliberately set the fire? The rest of the night, our shaken community huddled in a temporary shelter at a nearby school gym.
The Red
Cross provided cots, blankets, and basic necessities. Neighbors, previously strangers, now shared whispered stories and anxieties. Some wept openly, others sat in stunned silence. I found myself in a perplexing emotional state. Despite my genuine grief for our collective loss and anxiety about everyone's next steps, there was an undeniable, shameful relief that my paintings were safe. This relief brought a crushing wave of guilt. How could I feel anything positive when so many had lost everything? I curled onto a cot, but sleep wouldn't come. My phone constantly buzzed with messages from friends who'd seen the news, from Sophia checking on me, and from my parents, debating an immediate drive to New York. With full daylight, I stepped out of the gym to call Dad back. I'm safe, I assured him. Everyone got out. Thank goodness, he sighed, his relief palpable. But Audrey, everything you owned was in that apartment. Please tell me you at least had renter's insurance. The question I'd dodged for years finally demanded an honest answer. No, Dad, I never got around to it. His silence was deafening. I braced myself for the familiar lecture, the "I told you so," instead. He just sighed again and said, "We'll figure it out. Your mother and I will help however we can." Ending the call, I looked back at the school, where my neighbors were slowly stirring. Whatever the future held, I knew our lives had fundamentally shifted overnight. By 8 a.m., most of us were back at the barricade, gazing at the charred skeleton of our home. In daylight, the devastation was even starker. The building stood like a wounded beast, windows blown out, brick facade blackened. Water still dripped, and the air reeked of wet ash and melted plastic. Fire officials permitted small groups, escorted, to retrieve essentials. My turn came, paired with a young firefighter, barely out of his teens. 15 minutes, maximum, he cautioned. Just grab absolute necessities. ID, meds, that kind of thing. Entering felt surreal. The once dim lobby was now a watery swamp of debris. We climbed the stairs, the elevator obviously defunct. Each floor was worse, so by the time we reached my fourth-floor apartment, I braced for total ruin. Surprisingly, my unit mostly suffered water and smoke damage. The fire's intensity was above and below. Still, everything was ruined. Clothes soaked, reeking of smoke, books swollen and fallen. My sketching couch waterlogged and stained black. I grabbed my passport from the fireproof box, a backup hard drive of photos, and a small wooden box holding grandmother's few jewels. As I turned to leave, my sketchbook caught my eye on the kitchen counter, miraculously dry under a pile of mail. I added it to my meager salvage. Outside, insurance adjusters were already taking statements. One approached, clipboard ready.
Name.
An apartment number? He asked crisply. Audrey Wilson, 4C, and your insurance provider? I hesitated. I don't have renter's insurance. His professional demeanor softened to pity. I see, without insurance, you won't qualify for immediate housing assistance or property reimbursement. You can check with FEMA or local disaster relief. As he moved on, Vanessa appeared, still in her hospital scrubs, eyes red from crying or sleeplessness. Did you hear what people are saying? She whispered. About what? About Mr. Vasquez. No one can find him. And apparently he doesn't own the building anymore. He sold it 3 months ago. This was news to me. To whom? Some company called North Star Development. Rumor is they've been buying up old buildings all over Brooklyn. As we spoke, the pieces clicked, the increasing accidents, the mysterious inspectors, Mr. Vasquez's evasiveness. A cold dread settled in my stomach. By noon, a small cluster of tenants convened at a coffee shop across the street. Someone had already established a group chat for sharing whispers and rumors. Walter, newly discharged from the hospital, arrived with concrete information. I spoke to my nephew, who's in real estate, he rasped, his voice still hoarse from smoke. North Star Development has a reputation. They acquire old buildings in gentrifying neighborhoods. Then, mysteriously, fires break out. Suddenly, they can demolish and erect luxury condos. That's illegal. I protested. They can't just burn down buildings with people inside. Of course it is, Walter conceded. But it's devilishly hard to prove. They're cautious. The fires typically begin in unoccupied sections, usually at night, when most residents would be alert to smoke. They're not trying to kill anyone, just to destroy the structure. As if on cue, a young man approached our table, tall, curly-haired, glasses, carrying a messenger bag emblazoned with a local news site's logo. "Excuse me," he began. "I'm Derek Sullivan, a reporter with Brooklyn Daily. I'm covering the fire and hope to ask some questions." We were hesitant, still reeling from shock. But Derek seemed genuinely concerned, and Walter believed media attention might offer some protection. One by one, we recounted our experiences and suspicions. "This isn't my first time hearing about North Star," Derek admitted, listening intently. "There have been at least 3 other suspicious fires at their properties in the past 2 years. Nothing's ever been proven, but the pattern is unsettling." He then showed us research he'd already compiled. North Star was owned by a larger corporation, itself a subsidiary of an investment group. This convoluted web of ownership made it nearly impossible to trace who was truly pulling the strings. Mid-conversation, my phone rang. It was Sophia, the gallery owner. "Audrey, I just heard about the fire. Are you okay?" "I'm fine," I reassured her. "I was at the gallery when it happened, remember?" "Thank goodness." "Listen, I know this is awful timing, but the exhibition is still on. In fact, several collectors already expressed interest after seeing your work during setup." A fragile spark of hope ignited within me. My art was safe, and the show might actually succeed. It felt utterly wrong to consider my career at such a moment, yet it was the single flicker of light in an otherwise crushing day. As I hung up, I saw my father entering the coffee shop. He spotted me instantly, his face a blend of profound relief and concern as he hurried over. He'd driven straight through the night from Ohio. "Audrey," he said, pulling me into a fierce hug. "I had to see for myself that you were safe." For a fleeting moment, I was just his daughter again, comforted by his steadfast presence. Then he pulled back, and the practical Harold re-emerged. "I've already looked into temporary housing options, and I brought some clothes and essentials for you." He glanced at my neighbors. "Have you started filing insurance claims?" "Dad," I said quietly, "I told you I don't have insurance." His expression hardened, but he simply nodded. "Right. Well, we'll figure it out. The important thing is your safety." As the day progressed, our tenant group became more cohesive. Someone launched a spreadsheet for resources. Another set up a fundraising page. Derek pledged to delve deeper into North Star, connecting us with tenants from other buildings facing similar fates. By evening, North Star made their presence known. Eliza Burke, a representative, glided into the coffee shop, impeccably dressed in a pantsuit that likely cost more than 3 months of my rent. "On behalf of North Star Development, I want to express our profound concern about what transpired," she stated smoothly. "We're cooperating fully with authorities to ascertain the fire's cause. When did your company purchase the building?" Walter asked, his voice sharp. She offered a thin smile. "I'm not authorized to discuss specific business transactions, but I assure you, North Star is deeply committed to the safety and well-being of all residents." "Then why didn't you inform us of the ownership change?" I challenged. "And why were inspectors in the building yesterday without proper notice?" Her smile remained fixed. "I'm unaware of any inspections yesterday." Perhaps they were city officials. No one believed her, but we lacked tangible proof. As she departed, distributing business cards, Derek and I exchanged knowing glances. This wasn't just about my lost apartment. This was about a systematic exploitation of vulnerable tenants, unfolding across the city. That night, curled on my father's hotel room couch, I made an unshakable decision. I wouldn't simply relocate and rebuild my life elsewhere. I would uncover the truth and hold North Star accountable not just for myself, but for every single one of my neighbors who had lost everything. The next morning, Derek and I met for coffee before he headed to the city records office. He'd agreed to aid my investigation into North Star, recognizing a potentially monumental story in their suspicious pattern of property acquisition and subsequent accidents. The key, he explained, is proving a financial motive to oust rent-controlled tenants, then linking that motive to the fires. That's how we get authorities to act. I spent my day contacting other tenants, meticulously compiling a timeline of strange occurrences leading up to the blaze. Vanessa remembered seeing unfamiliar maintenance workers in the utility room just days before. Walter recalled overhearing a heated argument between Mr. Vasquez and a man in an expensive suit roughly 2 weeks prior. My father, meanwhile, grew increasingly exasperated with my singular focus on investigation over practical concerns. "Audrey, you need to find a new place to live," he insisted over lunch. "You need to replace your basic necessities. Let the police handle the criminal investigation." "Dad, the police aren't prioritizing this," I argued. "To them, it's just another building fire until proven otherwise. Meanwhile, these developers are getting away with destroying people's lives." His expression was pained. "I understand your anger, but you're not a detective or a lawyer. You're an artist with an exhibition opening in 10 days. Focus on that." "I can do both," I maintained, though a part of me wasn't entirely convinced. The harsh financial reality was undeniable. Without renter's insurance, I'd lost possessions valued at roughly $30,000. My bank account barely covered a single month's rent for a new place, assuming I could even find one without a broker's fee. While the gallery exhibition offered a glimmer of potential income, it was far from guaranteed. Over the ensuing days, our once united community began to splinter. Some moved in with family or friends outside the city, others found temporary shelter through relief agencies. Our group chat grew quieter as individuals grappled with rebuilding their own lives. On the third day post-fire, North Star played their hand. Eliza Burke emailed all former tenants, offering a goodwill settlement of $3,000 each, in exchange for signing a release of all claims against the company. "It's a trap," Derek warned immediately. "If you sign, you forfeit any future legal action, even if we unearth definitive proof of their culpability." But for many neighbors, who now had nothing, $3,000 was a powerful temptation. By weeks, and almost half had accepted, including the Patel family, desperate to keep their grocery store afloat. My father intensified his pleas for me to return to Ohio, just temporarily, he urged, "until you get back on your feet." The mere thought of retreating to my hometown, perceived as a failure, was unbearable. I'd left 8 years prior, fueled by an unyielding resolve to prove an artistic life was viable. To go back now felt like a crushing admission of defeat. The gallery became my haven. Sophia had given me a key, and I often spent nights on her office couch, immersing myself in exhibition prep. My new paintings, forged from the raw emotional fallout of recent events, possessed a visceral energy, a power even I couldn't deny. Through Derek's network, we connected with Josephine Alvarez, a tenacious lawyer specializing in tenant rights. She agreed to meet with the remaining residents who hadn't accepted North Star's settlement. "Building a case will be challenging," she cautioned in her file-cluttered office. "These companies are highly sophisticated. They expertly distance actions from decisions, employing layers of contractors and subcontractors. Tracing the money and responsibility becomes nearly impossible." "But not completely impossible?" I pressed. She offered a faint smile. "Not completely, but it demands time and resources most displaced tenants simply don't possess," leaving her office. Walter sighed heavily. "I'm 82, Audrey. I don't have years for a legal battle. I need a place to live now." His words struck deep. While I was young enough to crash on couches and driven enough to pursue justice, many neighbors faced far grimmer realities. The pressure mounted when an unknown number left a voicemail. "Miss Wilson, this is a courtesy call to remind you that pursuit of baseless claims can constitute defamation. North Star values its reputation and will defend it vigorously." The professional female voice held an undeniable, chilling threat. I played it for Derek. His expression turned genuinely concerned. "They're worried," he mused, "which means we're probably onto something. But be careful, Audrey. These people have vast resources and connections. That night at dinner, Dad noticed my preoccupation. What's wrong? He pressed. And don't say nothing. I hesitated, then played him the voicemail. His face darkened. This has gone far enough. You're coming back to Ohio with me tomorrow, Dad. I can't. The exhibition opens in a week, and I need to see this through. See what through? Getting yourself hurt. Or worse. For what? An apartment you didn't even own? For justice? I snapped. 4 people who can't fight for themselves. Mr. Vasquez is still missing. Did you know that? What if something happened to him too? Dad shook his head. You always were stubborn, just like your mother. It wasn't a compliment. My exhibition preparations suffered as I split my time between North Star and my art. Sophia gently voiced concerns about the controversy impacting attendance. Some of our regular collectors have ties to real estate, she explained. I support you, but perhaps we could keep it separate from the exhibition. Even my health deteriorated. I barely slept, running on coffee and pure adrenaline. Dark circles rimmed my eyes. I was losing weight I couldn't afford to lose. The final blow came when Josephine called with grim news. The fire marshal's report is inconclusive. They can't definitively prove arson. Without that, our case is significantly weakened. That night, alone on the gallery couch, I questioned everything. Was my father right? Was I pouring good energy into a losing battle? Would it be better to accept the settlement, however meager, and start anew elsewhere? For the first time since the fire, I allowed myself to truly weep, not just for my lost possessions, but for the scattered community, for the sense of home ripped from all of us, and for the crushing powerlessness I felt against such calculated greed. The night of my exhibition opening arrived, a peculiar blend of anticipation and dread. The gallery was stunning, my paintings bathed in perfect light, my name elegantly displayed. Sophia had even secured a photographer from a prominent art blog. This could be your breakthrough, she'd told me, making final adjustments. Just for a few hours, try to focus on tonight. I wore a borrowed dress and shoes that pinched. My father, visibly uncomfortable amidst the art crowd, stood steadfast, determined to support me. He'd extended his hotel stay, unwilling to leave me vulnerable after that threatening voicemail. Initial reactions to my work were overwhelmingly positive. Critics lauded its raw emotional landscape and unflinching depiction of displacement. 3 paintings sold within the first hour, including my largest piece, for a sum that would cover several months' rent. I should have been ecstatic. Instead, my gaze kept darting to the door, half expecting North Star representatives. Derek had promised to arrive later with investigation updates. Around 9 p.m., the packed gallery quieted as 3 men in expensive suits entered. They moved directly to Sophia, engaging her in conversation, their eyes occasionally flicking towards. My stomach clenched. Audrey Wilson, one approached, hand extended. David Mercer, North Star Development. Impressive work. We're actually looking to commission pieces for our new building lobbies. The sheer audacity stole my breath. You want me to create art for the company that burned down my home? He maintained his smile, though his eyes hardened. That's a serious accusation, Miss Wilson. One that could be considered defamatory without evidence. Why are you here? I demanded, aware that nearby conversations had ceased. To appreciate art, he replied smoothly, and perhaps discuss how North Star might support your career. We're always looking to invest in local talent. You mean by buying my silence? His smile didn't falter. I mean creating a mutually beneficial relationship. After all, rebuilding a life and career after such a loss must be challenging. Before I could retort, my father stepped to my side. My daughter isn't interested in your support, he stated firmly. Please enjoy the exhibition, then leave her alone. David Mercer's expression chilled. Mr. Wilson, I presume. Your daughter has talent, but talent requires nurturing and stability. Something we could provide. She doesn't need your kind of help, Dad retorted. Mercer shrugged. As you wish. But remember, Miss Wilson, reputations in the art world are fragile. Collectors don't appreciate controversy. As they exited, the entire confrontation had been captured on several phone cameras. By morning, the Video went viral across social media, juxtaposed with summaries of the fire and direct accusations against North Star. My name was now inextricably linked with the allegations. The next day brought both immense opportunity and escalating threat. 3 more paintings sold as public interest surged in the artist-defying developers. But returning to my newly secured sublet, I found the door ajar, my few meager possessions strewn across the floor. Nothing of value was taken, but the message was chillingly clear. They knew where I lived. My father was furious. "That's it, you're coming home with me today. Pack whatever you need." For a moment, I was genuinely tempted. This intrusion felt violating in a way even the fire hadn't. Then Derek called, his voice buzzing with excitement. "I found something. Property records show North Star applied for demolition permits for your building 3 weeks before the fire. And get this, they applied for construction permits for a new luxury building at the same address just 1 week before the fire." He paused for effect. "How could they know the building would be condemned unless they planned it?" His discovery reignited my resolve, yet the break-in had shaken me more deeply than I cared to admit. That night, Dad and I had our most explosive argument yet. "This isn't a game, Audrey," he shouted, pacing the cramped sublet. "These people are criminals. They broke into your apartment. What do you think they'll do next?" "That's exactly why I can't stop," I retorted. "If I back down, they win. They'll just keep doing this to other buildings, other tenants. And what about your life, your safety, your future? Is this crusade worth risking everything?" "Some things are worth fighting for, Dad. You taught me that." He stopped, staring at me. "I taught you to be practical, to build security, not to tilt at windmills." "No," I countered quietly. "You taught me to stand up for what's right. Remember when the bank tried to foreclose on the Johnsons' farm, and you helped them with their finances for free? Or when you testified against your own boss for cooking the books at your first accounting job?" He looked away. "That was different." "How?" "You risked your job, your reputation because it was right. I'm not risking my safety." He ran a frustrated hand through his hair. "I just don't want to see you hurt." "I know," I said softly, "but I need to do this." He left soon after, returning to his hotel. For the first time since the fire, I was truly alone with my thoughts. The small sublet felt cavernous and threatening after the break-in. Every noise made me jump. Around 3 a.m., exhausted but unable to sleep, I wondered if Dad was right. Was I foolishly idealistic? Was this fight simply too immense for me? With dawn came a profound clarity. I sat by the window, watching the city awaken, and reviewed the sales records from my exhibition. Each sold painting represented not just income, but a deep connection. Someone had seen my vision, valued it enough to bring it into their home. The realization struck me like a lightning bolt. My art wasn't merely a career path. It was a platform, a voice, even a weapon. I called Sophia the moment business hours began. "I want to do a special exhibition," I explained. "Something about housing injustice and community displacement, using materials salvaged directly from the building." A long silence stretched before she replied. "Audrey, that's not what galleries typically do." "I know," I pressed, "but it could be incredibly powerful and timely." "Let me think about it," she finally conceded. "Regardless, you should come by today. More checks from sales are waiting." The funds from my sold paintings provided immediate relief. I could afford a slightly better apartment, art supplies, and basic necessities. More crucially, it granted me the freedom to refuse North Star's increased settlement offer of $5,000. I reconnected with the scattered tenants, proposing a new strategy. Instead of solely battling North Star legally, we would fight them in the court of public opinion. Derek's articles had already sparked interest, but an art installation could reach an entirely different audience. Many were skeptical, but Walter surprised me with his enthusiasm. "At my age," he declared, "you learn that sometimes the indirect approach works best. Hit them where they're not looking." Over the next few days, we convened at the remains of our building, meticulously collecting charred fragments of the structure. Personal items too damaged for salvage but too meaningful to discard. Each piece held a story, a tangible fragment of our community's lost life. Derek relentlessly pursued his investigation, uncovering troubling connections between North Star and several city officials who'd fast-tracked their permits. He also located a former North Star employee willing to speak anonymously about the company's disturbing practices. They call it accelerated vacancy, he revealed. They never explicitly order arson, but they make it abundantly clear that bonuses hinge on buildings being emptied quickly. As word of our project spread, housing advocates and tenant organizations reached out, eager to join forces. What began as my personal battle was rapidly solidifying into a broader movement. One evening, sifting through salvaged materials in my sublet, a knock sounded at the door. Wary after the break-in, I peered through the peephole. My father stood in the hallway, suitcase in hand. "Dad?" I opened the door, bewildered. "I thought you went back to Ohio." "I did," he said, stepping inside. "And then I came back. I've taken a leave of absence from work." "Why?" He set down his suitcase. "Because you were right about standing up for what's right. And about me teaching you that." He surveyed the art materials covering every surface. "I don't entirely understand what you're doing with all this, but I want to help, if you'll let me." It was the last thing I ever expected. My pragmatic, spreadsheet-loving father wanting to join my artistic protest against corporate greed. "I also brought something that might help," he added, pulling out his laptop. "I've been examining North Star's financial statements. Public companies leave paper trails, and accounting has always been my specialty. For the first time since the fire, a profound surge of hope coursed through me. With my father's analytical acumen and my artistic vision, we might actually stand a fighting chance against North Star. That night, Dad slept on my couch, his presence somehow rendering the small space immeasurably safer. Before drifting off, I realized that amidst all the loss, something unexpected had been gained. My father and I were finally seeing each other clearly, as adults with distinct strengths, yet bound by shared values. The following morning delivered another revelation. Derek called with news. A North Star whistleblower had emerged. Someone with direct access to internal communications regarding the accelerated vacancy program. This could blow the case wide. "Open," he exclaimed. "They've agreed to meet us tomorrow." When I informed my father, he nodded pensively. "That's excellent, but we still need to follow the money. Corporations like North Star never make decisions without calculating the financial benefit." As he returned to his spreadsheets and I to my art installation plans, I felt a peculiar sense of equilibrium. The practical and the creative now working in perfect tandem towards justice. It was a partnership I'd never conceived before the fire that stole my home, a fire that, ironically, might have salvaged my relationship with my father. With Dad's invaluable assistance, our strategy sharpened. While I dedicated myself to the art installation designed to visually narrate our story, he meticulously traced North Star's financial activities, hunting for hidden patterns and irregularities. He established his command center at my small kitchen table, buried under printouts of annual reports and property records. "They're concealing their liabilities," he explained one night, gesturing at a complex chart he'd devised. "See these shell companies? They're engineered to absorb any legal repercussions, shielding the parent company's core assets." His business acumen became indispensable as we refined our strategy. We couldn't merely expose North Star's illegalities. We had to make continuing these practices financially agonizing for them. The art installation began to materialize in a donated warehouse. I constructed a scaled replica of our building using charred wood and melted objects salvaged from the site. Within each apartment, former tenants contributed personal mementos and written narratives of their lives pre-fire. Walter's jazz records, mostly warped but still identifiable. A child's drawing from the Patel's apartment. My own paintbrushes, handles blackened but still usable. We titled the installation Accelerated Vacancy, reclaiming North Star's own chilling internal term. Derek's articles about the project generated considerable buzz, and housing advocacy groups amplified the message. What had started as my individual protest was rapidly solidifying into a powerful community movement. Meanwhile, our whistleblower, Tanya, a former North Star administrative assistant, delivered crucial evidence. She'd covertly copied emails discussing preparation work at our building just days before the fire. While not explicitly illegal, the timing and phrasing were suspicious enough to demand scrutiny. They were meticulous about never putting anything incriminating in writing, Tanya explained in a hushed tone when we met at a quiet cafe. But everyone knew what was expected: clear the buildings quickly, whatever it takes. With this new information, Josephine believed we finally had enough to approach the district attorney's office. It's still circumstantial, she cautioned. But combined with the pattern of fires at their properties and the financial incentives, it might be enough to launch an investigation. My father, initially dubious about our legal prospects now, fully committed himself to building the case. He arrived one morning with startling news. I'd been speaking to some business contacts, he said, pouring coffee in my small kitchen. It turns out several of my clients have investments in the fund that owns North Star's parent company. They are not pleased about being linked to potentially illegal activities. Can they help us? I asked. They're applying pressure from the inside. Investors despise negative publicity. It tanks stock prices. Our burgeoning coalition continued to expand. Tenants from other North Star properties stepped forward with similar narratives. Community organizations offered unwavering support and resources. Local politicians, recognizing a potent public cause, began questioning the company's dealings. The installation debuted on a rainy Tuesday evening. Despite the weather, the warehouse buzzed with visitors. News crews filmed as people moved through the meticulously recreated building, absorbing stories, touching charred remnants, experiencing a fragment of our collective loss. I stood near the entrance, observing their reactions. Many emerged with tear-filled eyes. Others looked enraged. Crucially, everyone left discussing housing justice and corporate accountability. My father stood beside me, clearly out of his element in the artistic setting, yet brimming with pride for what we'd achieved together. Your mother would have loved this, he murmured. She always said your stubbornness would either be your downfall or your greatest strength. The exhibition garnered extensive coverage, not merely from local media but from national outlets. A prominent news magazine ran a feature on the artists fighting big development. Suddenly, North Star found itself under an unforgiving national spotlight. Their response was entirely predictable. First, legal threats, cease and desist letters, demanding we retract specific allegations. When those proved ineffective, they launched an aggressive PR campaign, painting themselves as unjustly targeted community partners. North Star Development remains committed to creating quality housing for all New Yorkers, their spokesperson declared in a televised interview. These baseless accusations distract from the real housing issues facing our city. The pressure intensified. One night, someone broke into the warehouse, vandalizing parts of the installation. Anonymous online accounts began to viciously attack my artistic credibility and personal character. Derek received chilling warnings that his job might be jeopardized if he persisted in covering the story. Through it all, my father remained remarkably resolute. When I voiced my doubts after the break-in, he simply stated, "They wouldn't be fighting this hard if we weren't hitting a nerve." Our personal relationship deepened as we toiled side by side. I grew to value his incisive analytical mind and unyielding principles. He, in turn, began to grasp my profound need for creative expression and social justice. Though fundamentally different individuals with distinct approaches to life, we had discovered common ground in this fight. After weeks of relentless persistence, the district attorney's office finally agreed to meet with us. Assistant Doug Gloria Hayes, a formidable woman, listened intently to our accumulated evidence. This is concerning, she conceded, especially the pattern across multiple properties. But building a criminal case will be challenging. These companies employ excellent lawyers. So do we, my father interjected. And we possess something they don't, the truth. It was such an uncharacteristically dramatic declaration from my typically pragmatic father that I almost chuckled, yet Hayes seemed genuinely impressed by his conviction. I'll assign an investigator, she promised. But these cases take time, sometimes years. Time was a luxury many of our coalition members couldn't afford. Walter had moved in with his nephew in New Jersey. The Patels struggled to keep their store afloat without the steady stream of customers from our building. Others had been forced to leave the city entirely. We desperately needed a more immediate win. That's when my father had his breakthrough. "I've been scrutinizing their inspection records," he announced one night, spreading papers across my bed since my art supplies covered the table. "There's a clear pattern, the same inspectors signing off on their buildings, even with blatant code violations." "You think the inspectors were bribed?" I asked. "I think we should follow the money." He then showed me a spreadsheet, meticulously tracking payments from a North Star subsidiary to a consulting company owned by the brother-in-law of the city's deputy building commissioner. This revelation electrified our investigation. Derek immediately delved into the connections between North Star executives and city officials. Josephine began compiling documentation for a much broader corruption case. North Star, sensing the tide turning against them, made one final, desperate attempt to silence us. Eliza Burke arrived at my sublet unannounced, presenting an offer that dwarfed all previous settlements. $100,000, she stated, sliding a document across my tiny coffee table. Plus guaranteed housing in any North Star property of your choice. All we require is that you cease this campaign and sign a non-disclosure agreement. The sum was staggering. It would secure my future, fund my art career, solve every immediate problem. For a fleeting moment, I was tempted. My father, who had remained silent throughout her presentation, finally spoke. "And what about the other tenants? What about the next building North Star decides to accelerate?" Eliza's smile tightened. "This offer is exclusively for Miss Wilson. We acknowledge her unique influence in this situation." "You mean you want to buy her silence while continuing business as usual," Dad clarified. I pushed the document back across the table. "I'm not interested." After she left, my father looked at me with newfound respect. "That was a lot of money to walk away from. Some things are worth more than money," I replied, unknowingly echoing a lesson he had taught me long ago, though neither of us had realized I was listening at the time. The following week brought our first major breakthrough. Based on the evidence we'd compiled about the suspicious inspections, the city launched an official investigation into the building department. 2 inspectors were promptly suspended. Then came news that investors were pulling out of North Star's parent company, causing their stock to plummet. Financial pressure often succeeded where moral arguments alone fell short. Finally, nearly 3 months after the fire, the district attorney announced a formal investigation into North Star Development for fraud, reckless endangerment, and potential arson conspiracy. It wasn't a conviction, but it was a beginning. More crucially, it validated everything we had asserted. We weren't merely disgruntled tenants or conspiracy theorists. We were citizens demanding accountability. The night of the announcement, my father and I celebrated with takeout Chinese food in my sublet, eating from cartons on my second-hand furniture. I looked at him, realizing how profoundly things had shifted between us. "I am proud of you, Audrey,"
he said, reaching for the last egg roll.
"Your mother always said you had fire in you. I used to worry about that. Now I see it's your greatest strength. I couldn't have done this without you," I confessed. "Your spreadsheets and financial detective work made all the difference," he smiled. "Maybe we make a good team after all." The artist and the accountant. As we clinked our water glasses in a quiet toast, a deep sense of peace settled over me. Despite the uncertainties still ahead, regardless of North Star's ultimate fate, my father and I had found our way back to each other through this fight. Some buildings may have burned, but other, more essential foundations had been strengthened. 1 year post-fire, I stood in the courtroom as the verdict was delivered. The case against North Star had progressed with surprising speed. Once the
Corruption was laid bare. 3 executives now faced criminal charges, including conspiracy and reckless endangerment.
The company itself was ordered to pay substantial damages to all former tenants. My father sat beside me, his hand finding mine as the judge read the decision. His temporary leave had transitioned into early retirement. He devoted himself entirely to our cause. Together, we had navigated the convoluted legal system, amassed crucial evidence, and tirelessly supported our community of displaced neighbors. The victory felt surreal after so many arduous months. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed as Josephine made a statement on behalf of all tenants. Today's verdict, she declared, sends a clear message: no corporation is above the law. Housing is a human right, not merely a commodity to be exploited for profit. That evening, we celebrated at the community center, an organization born from our advocacy. The settlement funds hadn't just compensated individual tenants. They established a housing justice organization and funded a new affordable housing development on the site of our former building. Walter had returned from New Jersey to serve on the new organization's board. The Patels planned to open a grocery store on the new building's ground floor. Many former residents had secured apartments in the development, ensuring our community would truly remain intact. As people mingled, sharing food and stories, I found a quiet moment with my father near the windows overlooking the construction site where our home once stood. "Did I ever tell you why I laughed that night when you called about the fire?" I asked him. He shook his head. "I always wondered about that. It wasn't just relief that my paintings were safe," I explained. "It was a sudden, profound realization that everything I thought I needed wasn't what truly mattered. For years, I'd been so fixated on proving I could make it as an artist, I'd lost sight of why I created art in the first place. And why is that?" he prompted. I gestured around the room at the diverse group who had become my extended family through this ordeal. To connect, to tell stories that matter. The fire took my possessions, but it gave me purpose. My father nodded thoughtfully. "I had a similar revelation. All those years I spent pushing you towards security and stability. I thought I was protecting you. But sometimes, the greatest security comes from standing up for what's right, even when it's risky." The healing journey hadn't been easy. The initial months after the fire were a blur of shock and grief. I mourned the loss of my space, my routines, the small comforts that had defined my daily life. There were nights I cried myself to sleep, overwhelmed by the sheer scale of our fight. Then came the anger, fueled by each new discovery about North Star's calculated actions. That anger propelled me forward when exhaustion threatened to derail our efforts. It gave me the fire to create the installation, to speak at community meetings, to face down corporate lawyers. The lowest point hit when several key witnesses backed out, fearing retaliation. I nearly capitulated, convinced we were fighting an unwinnable battle against forces too powerful and entrenched. My father found me on the floor of my sublette, surrounded by case notes and sketches, utterly depleted. Instead of offering platitudes, he simply sat beside me in silence for a long time. Then he said, "You don't have to carry this alone. None of us do." It was the permission I needed to lean on others, to recognize that collective strength could sustain us when individual resolve faltered. Gradually, healing blossomed from unexpected sources. The artistic community rallied around me, offering studio space and supplies. Former neighbors checked in regularly, bringing home-cooked meals and companionship. Even strangers who had visited the installation reached out with messages of support. A year later, I now had a new studio apartment in a different neighborhood. My art career had flourished, with galleries across the country interested in my work. The installation had traveled to 3 cities, igniting conversations about housing justice wherever it went. Most surprisingly, my relationship with my father had undergone a profound transformation. The man who once dismissed my artistic ambitions as impractical now proudly explained my work to his friends. And I had gained a deep appreciation for his methodical approach to problems, his quiet persistence in pursuing justice through intricate systems and structures. "The building next door to the new development is for sale," Dad mentioned, drawing me back to the present. "It's owned by another development company with a similar business model to North Star. Are you suggesting what I think you're suggesting?" I asked, raising an eyebrow. He offered a slight smile. "I'm just saying our work might not be finished yet. The new tenant association could use our experience." I laughed, genuinely this time. Dad Wilson, housing justice warrior. "Who would've thought? Not me," he admitted. But that's the thing about losing what you thought was important. Sometimes you find what actually is. As the celebration continued around us, I reflected on the profound lessons of the past year. The fire had annihilated my home, yet it illuminated truths I might never have uncovered otherwise. About the power of community and resilience, about speaking truth to power, about forging common ground with those you least expect to understand you. And perhaps most importantly, about how loss can sometimes reveal what truly matters. My laughter on that terrible night had been the nascent recognition of a truth I couldn't yet articulate. Buildings can burn. Possessions can be destroyed, but the fundamental connections between people, and the courage to stand for something larger than oneself, can never be extinguished. Tonight, gazing at this improbable family we'd forged through crisis and struggle, I felt a deep sense of peace. Whatever challenges lay ahead, we would face them together, stronger for having been broken and rebuilt. Have you ever experienced a moment when what seemed like a disaster actually set you on a better path, or revealed a strength within you that you never knew existed until faced with a serious challenge? Thank you for listening.
Take care. Good luck.
Sam's gaze stayed locked on Nathan. Clara finally sat, arms crossed, voice cold. We'll take other steps. You can't block us forever. Forever's not the point, I said. Today is. And today you told me everything I need to know about how far you'll go. Jenna opened her journal and began to write. Nathan grabbed the folder without opening it, slid it under his arm like something stolen. At the door, he turned. You brought this on yourself. No, I said. You brought Lily into it. The door shut. Engines started. I stayed standing until their cars were gone. Margaret exhaled. That was ugly. It was honest, I said. Sam leaned back. They're not done. That was a shot across the bow. Next time will be formal. Let them, I replied. They've played their strongest card. Now I'll play mine. I picked up my yellow pad and wrote 3 words in block letters. Guardianship, custody, contempt. The heron, I thought, doesn't mind. Standing still, especially when the tide's about to turn. They didn't wait long to make good on their threat. 3 days after they'd sat in my kitchen and dangled Lily like a bargaining chip, I drove into town with a bag of Lily's favorite oatmeal, cookies. The plan was simple. Drop them off, maybe catch her at the door if she was home. When I pulled into their driveway, the curtains in the front window shifted, then nothing. I knocked, waited, knocked again. No answer. The bag felt heavier in my hand than it should have. I left it on the porch and drove away. The next day, I called Nathan straight to voicemail. I didn't bother leaving a message. I'd learned by now that those never got returned. 2 more calls over the next week ended the same way. Clara didn't pick up either. By the second week, I decided to catch Lily at school. It wasn't something I wanted to do, but I needed to see for myself that she was okay. I parked across the street from the playground just before dismissal. Kids spilled out in clusters, backpacks swinging, voices carrying. I spotted her, hair in a messy braid, pink jacket zipped to the chin. She was laughing with another girl, eyes bright, the same brightness I'd always known. I stepped out of the truck and raised a hand. She saw me. For a second, her face lit up even more. Then Clara's SUV pulled up, blocking my view. Clara leaned across the passenger seat. The door swung open, and Lily climbed in without a wave. The SUV pulled away before I could take another step. That night, I sat at the kitchen table with the heron drawing she'd made last month. I traced the lines of the wings with my finger, wondering if she even knew why I'd disappeared from her weekends, wondering what Clara had told her. The ache in my chest was something I hadn't felt since Evelyn passed. A hollow, steady pain, worse because it was deliberately inflicted. Haor. 3. I tried one last time, without warning. Saturday morning, I drove over with a small wooden box I'd made for her art supplies. Nathan answered the door, his stance filling the frame. Now's not a good time, he said. When? I asked. He shrugged. We'll let you know. You said this was temporary, I reminded him. It still is, but pushing isn't helping. His tone had That careful edge people use when they think they're holding all the cards. I took a slow breath. Tell her I stopped by. He didn't answer, just closed the door. I stood there for a few seconds, listening to the latch click into place. By the time I got home, I knew exactly what was happening. They were waiting for me to crack, to call back and say, "Fine, I'll sign whatever you want. Just let me see her." They thought the absence would grind me down, but all it did was sharpen something I'd kept sheathed until now. That Monday morning, I called Kelman. "They've cut me off," I told him. "No visits, no calls, no nothing. It's been nearly a month?" His voice was calm, but direct. "Then we go to court." The words landed heavily. "You think it'll work?" In this state, grandparents have standing if they can prove a substantial relationship and harm from cutting it off. You've got both. You've been a consistent caregiver. You've got witnesses, Margaret, Sam, even your neighbor who's seen Lily over there every week. "I don't want to drag her through this," I said. "You're not dragging her. You're protecting her connection to you that matters in the court's eyes. And frankly, if we don't move now, they'll claim you've been absent voluntarily." We met at his office that afternoon. The air was cool inside, the blinds half closed. He'd already pulled the forms. Petition for grandparent visitation. Motion for temporary contact. "We're asking for a temporary order first," he explained, sliding the papers toward me. "That gets you back in contact while we prepare for the full hearing. Judges don't like the idea of a child losing a positive relationship during litigation." I read the document slowly, the legal language dense but clear enough. Every petitioner was me. Every respondent was Nathan and Clara, my own son's name in black ink on the other side of the EV. The kind of thing you never expect to see in your life. Kelman laid out the steps. "We'll file with the county court. They'll serve notice to Nathan and Clara. The first hearing will be for the temporary order, probably in a week or two. After that, we build the case for permanent visitation." "What about them saying I am unstable or unfit?" I asked. "Then we prove otherwise. Clean record, steady income, documented involvement in Lily's life. We've got photos, text messages, testimony. You've done nothing wrong, Arthur." I signed where he pointed, my pen scratching against the thick paper. Each signature felt like crossing a bridge you can't walk back over. When I left the office, the March wind was sharp enough to sting. I drove home with the radio off, my mind replaying every moment with Lily. Painting on the porch, reading on the couch, fishing at the lake. If Nathan and Clara wanted to erase all that, they'd have to do it in front of a judge. That night, I pulled out the yellow pad and started a list. Every date Lily had been at my house in the last year, every holiday we'd spent together, every school event I'd attended. By midnight, the list was 3 pages long, proof not just for the court but for myself that what we had was real, worth defending. The next morning, I called Margaret, told her what I was doing. She didn't hesitate. "You need me to testify? I'll be there." Sam said the same. Even Jenna, who'd witnessed that last kitchen meeting, agreed to put her notes into an affidavit. The following week, the court clerk called with a date. Temporary order hearing, April 14th, 2 weeks away. 2 weeks until I could look Nathan and Clara in the eye in a courtroom and say, "This is not yours to take." I stood at the fence that afternoon, looking toward the horizon. The heron doesn't mind standing still, I thought again. But stillness isn't the same as surrender, and this fight was just beginning. The courthouse smelled faintly of varnish and old paper, the kind of scent that settles into wood and never leaves. I'd been here before for property filings and zoning disputes, but never like this. Today, it wasn't about a boundary line on a map. It was about a living, breathing part of my life. A little girl with paint under her fingernails and a laugh you could pick out of a crowd. Kelman met me at the top of the courthouse steps. He was wearing his usual navy suit, his briefcase tucked tight under one arm. "They're already inside," he said. "They?" I asked. though I didn't need to. Nathan, Clara, their attorney. I nodded. The words from that last kitchen conversation were still sharp in my memory. That's not love. That's leverage. We passed through security. The metal detector beeped at the change in my pocket. I dropped the coins into the plastic tray, watching them rattle to a stop. Every small noise felt amplified this morning. Inside the courtroom, the benches were half full. Margaret and Sam were there, seated together in the second row. Sam gave me a short nod. I spotted Jenna, too, her notary journal balanced on her lap, even though she wouldn't be recording anything today. Nathan sat at the respondents' table in a charcoal suit that looked like it had been worn to weddings and funerals alike. Clara was beside him, back straight, hair pulled into a tight knot. Her eyes slid over me once, unreadable, then back to the front. The judge entered, a woman with silver hair pulled neatly into a bun. She took her seat, adjusted her glasses, and called the case. Petition for grandparent visitation, Arthur Bennett versus Nathan Bennett and Clara Bennett. Hearing my last name on both sides of the V felt like a strange kind of fracture. Kelman rose. Your Honor, my client has been a consistent and positive presence in his granddaughter's life since her birth. He has served as a caregiver, provided for her needs, and maintained a close relationship with her until the respondents abruptly and without cause cut off all contact. We are seeking a temporary visitation order to preserve that relationship while the court considers the full petition. Their attorney stood. Your Honor, my clients acted in the best interest of their daughter. The home environment at Mr. Bennett's residence has become contentious due to ongoing property disputes between the parties. They believe limiting contact is necessary until those matters are resolved. The judge looked at Nathan. Mr. Bennett, is that accurate? Yes, Your Honor, Nathan said, his voice steady, practiced. We just want a calm environment for Lily. This situation has made things tense. Kelman leaned toward me and whispered, they're trying to make it sound mutual. When it was my turn to speak, Kelman asked me direct questions. Mr. Bennett, can you describe your involvement in Lily's life before contact was cut off? I told the judge about Saturday mornings making pancakes together, about walking her to the bus stop when Nathan was working early shifts, and about the afternoon she spent in my workshop building birdhouses. I didn't embellish. I didn't have to. And when was the last time you saw her? Kelman asked. Over a month ago, I said. They told me I wouldn't see her until I signed over my house and gave them power of attorney. A faint ripple went through the room. Clara's attorney objected, but the judge held up a hand. I'll allow it. Continue. Kelman turned to Jenna in the gallery. Miss Foster, could you please tell the court what you witnessed on February 17th? Jenna stood, voice clear. I was present at Mr. Bennett's home as a neutral witness. I heard Mrs. Bennett state that unless Mr. Bennett signed the property transfer documents, he would not see his granddaughter. I wrote it down in my journal immediately. The judge asked to see the entry. Jenna handed it to the bailiff, who brought it up. The judge read silently for a moment, then looked at Nathan and Clara. Did you make such a statement? Clara shifted in her seat. It was taken out of context. Answer the question, the judge said. Yes, Clara admitted finally. But that's enough, the judge said. Kelman rested his hands on the table. Your Honor, this is not about a calm environment. It's about using a child as leverage in an unrelated dispute. That is precisely what the law seeks to prevent. Their attorney tried to pivot, talking about emotional strain and family autonomy, but the judge's expression didn't change. She made a few notes, then addressed both sides. I'm granting the petitioner's motion for temporary visitation, she said. Effective immediately. Mr. Bennett will have visitation with Lily every other weekend, beginning this Saturday, from 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. at his residence. Exchanges will take place at the police substation parking lot for neutrality. I am also ordering both parties to refrain from making disparaging comments about each other in the child's presence. The gavel came down once. The sound was sharper than I expected. Nathan's jaw was tight, but he didn't look at me. Clara whispered something to him as they gathered their things. Kelman packed up his files. "This is a win," he said quietly. "Temporary orders often set the tone for final ones." I nodded, but my focus was already on the Saturday ahead. When the court adjourned, Margaret squeezed my arm. "You did the right thing." "I hope she thinks so," I said. Saturday came, cold and clear. I got to the substation early, the yellow line in the lot bright under the morning sun. At exactly 10 hours, Clara's SUV pulled in. Lily stepped out, backpack slung over one shoulder. She spotted me and broke into a run before Clara could say anything. I knelt, and she wrapped her arms around my neck. "Grandpa," she said, her voice muffled in my coat, "I made a new heron. It's better than the last one." I pulled back enough to see her face, the same brightness as always. "Can't wait to see it," I told her. Over her shoulder, Clara was already getting back into the SUV. For the first time in weeks, I didn't care what expression she wore. Lily was here. And for now, that was enough. Back at the house, she unpacked her paints at the kitchen table. The afternoon light caught in her hair, and the hum of the fridge was the only other sound. Watching her dip the brush, I realized something. Standing still like the heron isn't about waiting for the tide to turn on its own. It's about knowing when to strike. And this was only the first strike. I watched Nathan's taillights fade into the mist outside the courthouse, swallowed by a gray that felt like the earth itself wanted to close over this chapter. Clara followed behind, head down, phone pressed to her ear, her words fast and clipped. No sweetness left in her voice, only the brittle scrape of someone who'd lost control. I didn't need to hear the conversation to know they were already trying to salvage something, anything. People like them never stop scheming, but it didn't matter. The judge's order was stamped, signed, and entered into the record. I would see Lily every week, unsupervised. Starting now. Kelman walked beside me down the courthouse steps. His voice was low, deliberate. "You didn't just win today, Arthur. You took their strongest weapon and broke it in half." I nodded. The weight I'd been carrying didn't drop all at once. It loosened in slow spirals, like rope unwinding across the street. Margaret stood with Lily, who had been waiting the entire time. Her small frame was tense, eyes scanning every face until she saw me. Her whole body seemed to light up from the inside. Then she was moving faster than I'd ever seen her run. Her sneakers slapped the wet pavement, her hair flying behind her like a banner, until she crashed into me with a force that made my knees lock. Her arms locked around my waist, her face pressed so tight into my jacket, I could feel her breath against my chest. "You came back," she whispered, like those 3 words were the dam holding back weeks of fear. I wrapped my arms around her, breathing in the faint scent of paint still clinging to her sleeves. "I never left you, Lily. Not here," I said, pressing a hand gently over my heart. She pulled back just enough to meet my eyes. Her lashes were wet, but her gaze was fierce. "They said maybe you didn't want to see me anymore." The sentence cut through me like cold steel. I cupped her face in both hands. "That will never be true. Not for a second. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." She nodded, but her fingers didn't. "Release my coat." Over her shoulder, I saw Nathan standing by his truck, arms crossed, jaw hard enough to crack teeth. Clara was next to him, lips pressed in a bloodless line. They didn't approach. They didn't speak. And for the first time, there was no spin between us. The chasm would only widen from here. On the drive home, Lily's voice filled the car like sunlight creeping into a dark room. She talked about her art project, about how she decided the herons' wings needed streaks of brighter blue because birds should look like the sky they fly in. Not once did she mention Nathan or Clara. I didn't either. The court order might have given me weekends, but the real victory was here beside me, legs swinging, hands painting the air as she spoke. That evening, we walked down to the marsh together, the heron painting framed in oak under her arm. She set it against the old piling with care. "It's finished now," she said softly. "See, the wings are ready." I studied each brushstroke, deliberate, each shade chosen with purpose. "It's beautiful," I told her, "just like the artist." Her smile was unguarded, free of the shadows I'd seen in recent months, and for a moment, the air felt lighter. When she went to bed, I stood in the doorway of the guest room for a long time, listening to the steady rise and fall of her breathing. That sound was peace, the kind I'd been chasing without realizing it. Downstairs, the manila envelope sat. On the mantel, now heavier with certified copies of the order, the life estate deed, and my will naming Lily as the one to inherit it all when the time came. Locks on the gates, both the kind you can see and the kind only I know are there. I thought about Nathan and Clara then, not with rage, but with clarity. Tonight, they'd return to their own home, sit in separate rooms, speak in clipped sentences, maybe argue about what went wrong. And somewhere in the quiet between them, they'd feel it. They hadn't just lost a legal battle. They'd lost their hold over me and over her. That's something no court can give back. Upstairs, Lily stirred in her sleep but didn't wake. I turned off the light, letting the darkness settle like a calm hand over the house. Outside, the tide shifted with the wind, steady, patient, inevitable. The heron doesn't mind standing still because it knows the stillness is part of the hunt. And I've learned the same. Stillness isn't surrender. It's the quiet strength to protect what matters until the moment comes to move. One day, when Nathan and Clara look back, they'll see me exactly where they tried to push me out. Free, unshaken, and guarding the only treasure worth fighting for. Because in the end, the measure of a life isn't what you win, but what you refuse to lose.